Hi all, Bullhornbetty here. As many of you guys know, I'm in the process of fully exposing the conduct of a PI named James Michael Terry, which resides, to the best of my knowledge, in the state of Florida. But based upon his own admissions, he definitely does not reside in the state of Mississippi. Why is that important? So many of you guys know that I have an entertainment channel here on YouTube that covers true crime. And one of the cases that I have been following and covering is the Dylan Rounds case. In this Dylan Rounds case, it's of a 19-year-old boy that has a farm in Lucin, Utah that disappeared without a trace. His family, which is from Idaho, came in to try to find answers related to their missing son. Apparently, the grandfather of Dylan Rounds was reached out to by a one James Michael Terry to aid and assist as a PI in their grandson's case. It is also my knowledge that that grandfather paid James Michael Terry a sum of money, an undisclosed amount of money, for his services in the aid of finding his grandson. Since then, James Michael Terry has basically run amok, has no ethical standards, no moral compass, and is not the first time I've had interaction with this alleged PI. So once he started digging in and causing all this extra animosity toward victims' parents, which are also victims because they're trying to find their son. And this guy is on Doug with no thanks, basically telling the entire family, F you, F you, F you. Please listen to this skit, which was posted by Evil Exists.
Many are wondering whether private investigator James Terry, also known as Jim Terry, was actually served with a cease and desist letter. I was hoping to hear from him, as I saw a quote in a news report that said, "If they can't find me, then they can't serve me." However, Mr. Terry was interviewed on No Thanks Investigates channel again, and he gave us a piece of his mind, and we got to see what he thinks of this cease and desist letter. Warning, since there will be profanity in the upcoming clip. You can see the full interview on Doug's channel, which I will link in the description. Drop your thoughts in the comments.
To tell that law firm, Candace Cooley, and whoever else thinks that I am a fraud, that I have no legitimate background in this industry, or that I have for 1 minute lied about any of the things I believed in my investigation to be true. So the only way I know how to be me, and the only way I know how to answer that email in this unprofessional, extremely crude environment that we're in right now, this unlawful environment, is to answer it the only way I know how, and the only way the people out there know I would answer, the people that know me best, the people that know what's in my heart. So that's why I'd like to say at this time to everybody listening, to the East Idaho News, to any news affiliate out there that thinks that I'm a fraud, that does not have the background of my full career at their disposal. So without further ado, my statement is pretty simple. Be yourself, right? Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. Hey, listen.
Does that sound very professional? Does that sound like a PI that you would like to conduct business with? So this is not just a normal run-of-the-mill PI. Clearly, he has no moral turpitude. He has no moral compass and acts very unethically when practicing those PI types of tasks. So it made me wonder, who is James Michael Terry that is alleging he's this PI? When I looked at the cease and desist letter, which was sent by the attorney for the parents of Dylan Rounds on their behalf to tell James Michael Terry to cease and desist any more verbal or written communications about the case. He is not an expert and has not done the proper work necessary in this case. And he's actually muddying up the water in accordance with the cease and desist letter. Look at the cease and desist letter. So in the cease and desist letter, it's to James M. Terry, Gulf Coast Investigation at 2356 Curlew Road, Rear Office, Palm Harbor, Florida, 34683. Dear Mr. Terry, my office has been retained by the Grounds and Cooley family to send this letter to you and demand that you immediately cease and desist your continued unauthorized involvement in the Dylan Rounds case. You have made malicious, unfounded, and incorrect statements and have made verbal and written attacks on the Rounds and Cooley's family. Your continued unauthorized, malicious, false, and inflammatory statements are defamatory and subject you to payment of damages to my client. Your actions are diverting the focus of finding Dylan Rounds to what happens to appear to be your own personal vendetta and or to promote yourself at the expense of the truth. You are interfering with and undermining the investigation of Dylan Rounds' disappearance. You are damaging the integrity and the effectiveness of the entire investigation by your unauthorized, misinformed actions both publicly and privately concerning this investigation. The family of Dylan Rounds immediately demands that you cease and desist any further action, verbal and or written, pertaining to the investigation of Dylan Rounds' disappearance. Your failure to stop all further actions, verbal and or written, will result in filing legal action against you. The family of Dylan Rounds do not want to waste their time, resources, and energy with any further action against you in this matter and therefore request your immediate compliance. Your background and record of service has confirmed your lack of credibility and integrity. This has further been demonstrated by your actions in this matter since your release from this matter. And on the second page, it states, we further demand you send me, as legal counsel of Dylan Rounds' family, all recordings, memorandums, notes, and your complete file in this matter. Very truly yours, Ronald L. Swafford. So as you read the cease and desist letter, it does not sound like they are happy with his services. So he was brought up on my page and on my channel when we were discussing the Dylan Rounds case. And then more victims had come on panel and called in to tell me their story and their interaction with this guy. And all have been very, very horrible. Definitely not a professional person. So it makes me wonder, knowing all that I know, what kind of education, what kind of experience has this man had? Does this man possess?
In order to get my license, the piece of paper, and a fictitious name is nothing but a business name.
Absolutely.
In the state of Mississippi, there is no private investigating license.
I know that.
There's no private investigating license in Colorado,
right,
Idaho, South Dakota, Wyoming, Alaska.
So you're acknowledging that you do not have the proper credentialing to get a PI license, that you only work in states that do not require a PI license because you're not a legitimate PI. Then when I looked at that cease and desist letter, it clearly showed a Florida address. So I immediately checked the Florida search for his license to practice PI here in the state of Florida where he resides. Didn't find anything. The only thing I was able to find was an expired security officer license. That's it. And we don't even know if that belongs to him, but there is no expired license that he has ever obtained in the state of Florida. So then I go over to sunbiz.org to check to see if he has any filings for Gulf Coast investigation here in the state of Florida. There was no fictitious name and no corporation registered. Now, I realized he is residing in Florida and holds no PI license in the state of Florida, holds no business credentials of this business existing, and then we hear him go on No Thanks with Doug, No Thanks Investigations with Doug, and produces a bunch of this paperwork. So I screenshotted the paperwork and located all the paperwork, which was in Mississippi, and equated to him filing a $25 fee to have a fictitious name registered in Mississippi. So I was coming out with all this information this morning, and we were blessed with a call from Jim Terry himself, where he expresses he does not reside nor have a business in the state of Mississippi.
But not a convicted felon. So what I decided to do, because of the other career that I had, is to open the business up where I could work immediately.
Can you explain why your business license, let me ask you this. Can you explain why your business license, your fictitious name that registers you in the Mississippi, because you have to be a resident of Mississippi to have to conduct yourself as a Mississippi PI. You can't be, why is the address on your fictitious name in which you are relying to do business as a PI in Mississippi, why is it showing a Florida address?
Well, first of all, that's not true. You can have a business in the state of Mississippi and not be a resident. Otherwise,
but
they
you
wouldn't
cannot
have granted,
act.
otherwise they wouldn't have granted me the license. That's not true.
No.
That's not true.
No, I read it, and I will be calling to confirm this. You can have any business you want. You're right about that. You can have any business you want registered in Mississippi and reside in another state. You absolutely can. But in order to conduct yourself as a Mississippi PI, you are required to have a resident or a brick and mortar business in order to conduct yourself in Mississippi as a PI. Where's your business? Where's your resident in Mississippi to conduct yourself as a PI?
I don't have a residence in Mississippi.
So in order to conduct yourself as an officer, as a PI officer, or a PI investigator rather, in the state of Mississippi, you have to be a resident of that state to fall under the state of Mississippi's laws. If you are a resident of another state, the only thing you're allowed to do is go into the state of Mississippi to do private investigation work in the state of Mississippi and no other state, because you have to be a resident of the state to be able to follow those state laws. So even if Jim is not a resident of the state of Florida, whatever state he is a resident of, he is required to follow those state laws in any business practices he has. As of right now, all the information that we have been able to find shows that James Michael Terry, resides in the state of Florida and does not have a valid PI license to conduct PI business in the state of Florida or even solicit PI work even in states that require no PI license. He would actually have to be in the state that requires no state license, no PI license to perform PI practices in that state. For example, he can't be in the state of Florida, which has this strict requirement for a PI business, and be working on a case in Idaho without being in Idaho to work that case. That's how the law works in the states. For example, Mississippi law doesn't supersede Florida law whenever you're a resident in Florida, and vice versa. If you're a resident of Mississippi, you can't apply Florida law to a Mississippi resident or business. The same applies with this PI license. Therefore, based upon his own admission, he does not reside in Mississippi nor have a business in Mississippi other than paying a $25 fee to have a fictitious name business listed in Mississippi. If he resides in Florida, Florida law supersedes. He is in violation of the law. And I had an opportunity to speak to a gentleman out of Mississippi, which is the president. Let me get this correct so I make sure that this is all above board. He is the president of the Mississippi Professional Investigators Association in Mississippi, which he explains how the law works. There was a point in this interview where he didn't understand my question, but he later answered it further down in the interview. It is a must-see. Please stay tuned. It is playing now.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Andra Griffin, and you were corresponding with a colleague of mine. He was discussing the PI services that are conducted, you know, in Mississippi, and he said you were the president of the Well, just tell me a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, I'm currently the president of the Mississippi Professional Investigators Association.
Okay.
I'm also a police officer.
You're a police officer, and you've advocated for stricter requirements in Mississippi for the residents of Mississippi. Is that my understanding?
For years. Yeah. And I've written a lot of articles, and I've done a lot of interviews and podcasts and a lot of stuff because, you know, at one time I was licensed in 9 states. Mm-hmm. Now I'm licensed in 5 states. Well, 4. Yeah. Mississippi's not licensed. And several years ago, when I was president of the Mississippi PI Association, the first time, I noticed, because I had been a licensed PI for companies for years and years and years before I ever became a member of Mississippi PI Association. But when I was president of MPIA the first time, I noticed we kept getting applications from all over the country, as far away as Alaska. Mm-hmm. And that puzzled me. I thought, you know, why in the world does somebody in Alaska want to be licensed, want to be a member of the MPIA? This guy had an office in Anchorage and an office in Brandon, Mississippi, my hometown. And I thought, let me do a background on this guy. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he had a criminal history. And, of course, I found Alaska was not a licensed state and Mississippi was not a licensed state. So these problem unscrupulous PIs who can't get licensed in legitimate states, they come here. Mm-hmm. So that's what was going on. So, you know, I then implemented background checks and all this kind of stuff. But the first thing, the next thing I did was I wrote a bill. And I took some of it from Florida, some of it from Louisiana, and I created a bill to establish licensing for all PIs in Mississippi. Because as it stands now, you can get out of prison mm-hmm. and work as a PI the next day.
Wow, that's a little scary.
You know, it is. And there's only, I think, 4 states remaining in the entire country that have no licensing. Now, we're the only state in the entire southern half of the nation because it was always Alabama and Mississippi were the 2 non-licensed states. Mm-hmm. And every time I'd need a PI, I would say, where do you work? And they would always say the same, Alabama and Mississippi, because there's no licensing. Well, then Alabama created licensure several years ago. I was one of the first to get licensed there. My license number's 12 in mm-hmm. Alabama.
Wow.
But so I wrote this bill, and I started lobbying for it. And I got, it's weird, you know, I got a white Republican and an African American Democrat both to sign on to that legislation, bipartisan support. Mm-hmm. It flew through the House of Representatives unanimously. It went to the Senate, and the Senate put it in committee. And every year they kill it. They won't allow it to go to the floor.
Gotcha.
And the African-American Democrat who signed on to it, he called me. Mm-hmm. And he's under the governor at that time was Phil Bryant. He called me and he says, look, your bill is never going to pass because this governor wants no new boards and no new licensure And your bill calls for the establishment of the Mississippi PI Regulatory Board and all PIs to be licensed. He's not going to allow it to pass. So that's where we are, Mississippi. And we have a new governor. I put the bill in his hand. There's just, Mississippi sees that as bureaucratic red tape. When I met with the legislator, and quite honestly, the Republicans, I tend, because I'm a small business owner, I tend to lean a little more conservative when it comes to business. But to be quite honest, the Republicans are the ones that give me the most grief about that bill. Democrats are typically all on board, but they see it as bureaucratic red tape. It's cumbersome to business. When I met with one of the Republican leaders, my argument to him was, look, every other state's got it. I mean, there's only 4 left. We're going to be the only state left in the country. I thought that was a winning argument. But when I told him that, he said, good. We like being different. We don't want to be the same as everybody else, in his redneck voice.
Right.
So over the years, I just became so frustrated with it. And eventually, for years, I was part-time law enforcement, full-time PI. And several years ago, I went back. So now I'm full-time law enforcement, part-time PI, but I'm still the president of the Mississippi PI Association. And I actually went back to law enforcement just to be a detective and to do some investigative work. But over the past few years, I've risen through the ranks. Now I'm assistant chief, which that wasn't the plan. But so I'm assistant chief of police, and I'm president of the Mississippi PI Association.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this. So the rules and laws that you guys have in Mississippi for the PI is for residents of Mississippi. Like you guys can't supersede, say, if there was somebody that is in the state of Florida and is a state of Florida resident, obviously the state of Florida has its own regulations on how to conduct PI businesses. A Mississippi law doesn't supersede the state law in which that person lives in. Am I correct about that?
Well, you're correct and you're not correct. Let me tell you, there are no laws regarding PIs in Mississippi. Nothing. Nada. It doesn't matter if you're licensed somewhere, if you're not licensed somewhere. Now we have.
But that's just for the. Let me refresh that question. That's just for the state of Mississippi. Like you guys can't say that somebody from Florida has to follow Mississippi laws, but not Florida law. I mean, you guys can't. The state of Mississippi can't do that, right? It's only when they're conducting business in your state, not other states.
No, there's nothing regarding. Maybe I'm not understanding you, but there's nothing regarding PIs. It doesn't matter what you do.
That's in the state of Mississippi. So, for example, if you had a resident that lives in the state of Mississippi and has a brick and mortar store in Mississippi, they can conduct PI business without any kind of license or anything in the state of Mississippi. However, if that person that's trying to say they're a Mississippi PI but don't even reside in the state and say reside in the state of Florida that has much stricter PI laws, they can't then turn around and say, well, I'm licensed in Mississippi but reside in Florida. They would have to, in my opinion, follow Florida law. I didn't know if you were agreeing to that or not. Like I can understand that anybody can be licensed in Mississippi to conduct PI services inside of Mississippi. But once they reside in a different state, they have to follow that different state's laws, not Mississippi's.
No, that's not right.
Okay.
Because in Mississippi, anything goes. I mean, just think of it as the Wild West, tumbleweeds, street justice. I mean, there's just no laws. They don't care where you live. They don't care what you do. In Mississippi, there's no governance. Now, I'm licensed in Florida. I've had an agency license in Florida. I'm licensed in Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida. And in Mississippi, you're supposed to have a business license if you have any kind of business. Now, I have a business license, but they don't even enforce that. Now, to join MPIA, I mean, our bylaws, I mean, we make you have to live here to be an active member, and we'll check. We have to check because we have so many people that lie. It's ridiculous that we have to really check, applicants to want to be members here. But if you don't live here, you can be an associate member.
Gotcha.
Now, the problem comes into play if the Mississippi PI lives in Mississippi and he wants to follow somebody or go to Florida. He cannot without a Florida license. I argued with an attorney one time who said in Jackson, Mississippi, he said, I need you to follow this guy to Memphis. And I said, I can't. He said, why not? I said, well, I'm not licensed in Tennessee. I used to be. I used to be licensed in 9 states. But I said, I don't have a license in Tennessee. And he's got reciprocity on the brain. So he says, it doesn't matter. This is a Mississippi case. You can go there. I said, no, I can't. Because we have no reciprocity with them because we have nothing to have reciprocity with. We don't have a license.
Yeah.
Now, my Alabama license has a reciprocity agreement with Tennessee. So if I had an Alabama case and my subject went into Tennessee, I could follow him and work that case for up to, like 15 days.
Mm-hmm.
But in Mississippi, you can't do that. Now, I've lost work because let's say I'm working a case where the subject is going back and forth to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Now, an Alabama PI can take that case because he can go in and out of Mississippi all he wants to and in and out of Alabama. But a Mississippi PI can't take that case because a Mississippi PI cannot go to Alabama without a license.
And that actually, you just answered my original question that I was asking you that you were confused on. That was where I was going with it, just to let you know.
Yeah. So this can come and go in Mississippi and do whatever he wants to, and nobody in Mississippi cares anything about what's going on in Florida. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Florida may have an issue because, Florida, their PIs are, let's see, I'm licensed in Florida under the Florida Department of Agriculture, oddly enough. So he's licensed with them, and they follow up on complaints and investigate, things like that. And if he's lying about his residency in Florida, it would be an issue. But Florida doesn't care if he goes to Mississippi. Mississippi doesn't care if he comes to Mississippi. I mean, he can do whatever he wants to over here. The only recourse here would be to file a lawsuit, and there's been documented cases of that. I mean, he's not going to be able to join MPIA,
mm-hmm.
especially not now. After this is being brought to my attention, I wouldn't allow it.
Right.
But people will Google. I get calls like this pretty frequently, and people will Google Mississippi PI licensing, and my name will always come up because I've been outspoken about it. I've been bitching about it for years, and they'll see MPIA and they'll think we're some kind of governing body or something.
Yeah.
So they'll call me and they'll say, we want you to investigate it. And I tell them, look, there's nothing you can do. I mean, you can sue him.
Right.
But, and the news media needs to be aware of it. I gave him the name of a reporter who's interviewed me about this before.
Yeah.
But, until that happens, we're going to have convicted felons. We're going to have rapists and pedophiles. We're going to have people working as PIs in Mississippi because they can't.
Yeah.
Now it becomes a problem when you try, like I have TLO as one of my database companies.
Mm-hmm.
TLO, they want a copy of your license. They want to inspect your office. They want to make sure you have an office with a locking door and a shredder and all this kind of stuff. And most Mississippi PIs can't pass that inspection.
Right.
So
they don't have programs, the legitimate programs that you use to find and track people. They can't use them.
Yeah, there's some companies that if you tell them, live in Mississippi, they'll say, okay, well, just give us your business license. Which, my business license costs $25
mm-hmm.
a year, and you just fill out an application. There's no background on it. But for MPIA, we require a copy of your business license. And see, now I'm licensed with Secretary of State and the county, that's what you're supposed to do. But even MPIA, we had such a problem with people bitching about it. Now we require one or the other. Give us a business license, fill out an application, give us your address and some references. We're going to contact them, and if we've got anybody anywhere close to where you live, we're going to go out there and check it out. Yeah. So, that's what we require. And oddly enough, we deny applications all the time. It sucks because we want to grow.
Right.
But we just can't have all these unscrupulous PIs joining MPIA.
Right.
I mean, when I became a member, I don't know, over a decade ago, our secretary and treasurer was a convicted felon.
Yeah.
I mean, when I became president, first thing I did was take that from him.
Right. Right.
So, you know, and the MPIA was organized and created to help pass licensure, and the early boards back in the day was active in it, but it never passed.
Right.
And then when I came along, you know, I went down there, I lobbied, I did interviews, I did all kinds of stuff, and it just, you know, the Senate won't pass, because if it goes to the floor, it's going to pass.
Yeah.
They just don't want it. They don't want it on the floor.
Yeah.
They don't want
this
that.
This is the issue that I can foresee coming up. Like, you know, we're talking about Dylan Rounds, where his family, you know, lost their son. They don't know where he's at. They're from different states, and you know, this PI trolled a missing person, you know, group, and reached out to them. And so here's where the damage is him muddying up. He's in Florida, so even though Mississippi can say, you know, they can be sued, but you have to sue in the state where the people reside. And he doesn't even reside in Mississippi, but he's utilizing, or at least trying to utilize, the laws in Mississippi to skirt Florida law.
Yeah, yeah.
It's convoluted.
Yeah, it is, and it seems to me like the Florida Department of Agriculture, I think, needs to be aware of this. But, you know, because PIs also have, you know, ethics. I mean, I have to take continuing education in these other states, and I've taught ethics, and ethics is a big part of PI licensure. So I think I would still advise them of this. And this is a good story, I think, for LBT. I sent him WLBT's number and a reporter that he should reach out to, because, you know, I hear this periodically, where missing persons are being taken advantage of by these PIs. There's another one on the Gulf Coast, lives around Biloxi or something, that does this. He takes people's money, you know, and you know, that seems to be a reoccurring thing. But, you know, if you get a reporter in Florida or Mississippi on board, I would be happy to speak with them by phone, Skype, whatever. I'll be happy to take part in any kind of interview like that.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to just, you know, just explain how this guy is, you know, he may be licensed in Mississippi. He's not licensed in any other state. He's done it, you know, as a loophole that's not going to work, because, again, he resides in the state of Florida, which have very strict PI laws and, you know, continuing education, like you have spoke about, that you have to take yourself. And, you know, this guy is just doing some damage, and I feel really bad because, you know, he's victimizing victims already. And it's just sad.
He is, and as long as he claims he's doing it in Mississippi, or he can't do it in Florida.
Yeah, well, that's where he's residing, and he's obtaining clients from the state of Florida.
Well, see, now, if, you know, when he's working in Florida, he's got to, you know, abide under his Mississippi PI license and the Mississippi PI, the Florida PI license and Florida PI laws.
Yep.
That shit about, well, I'm a Mississippi PI, Florida don't care.
Yep.
Now, if he's in Mississippi doing that, he can do whatever he wants to. But as long as he's in Florida, he's not going to get away with any of that, because the Florida Department of Agriculture don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, maybe once you get them on board and speak with an investigator over there, they can take some kind of action against him. You know, they could probably suspend his license.
Yeah.
His Florida license. And
he doesn't have one.
Mississippi and work. Does he? I thought he had a C license in Florida.
No.
He doesn't have a license in Florida at all?
Nope.
All right, so I'm a little confused. I thought you were telling me he was licensed in Florida and doing a lot of this stuff in Mississippi.
No, just the opposite.
Okay. Well, then he's committing a crime.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so now I'm better on board, and maybe it's because I'm from Mississippi, I'm not very smart. But if he is in Florida and working as a PI, he is committing a crime. It is illegal to work as a PI in Florida without being licensed, no matter where in hell he worked. Now, if he had another license and had reciprocity with Florida, even then, he's going to have to prove that in the guidelines. Like, you can work one case that bleeds over into Florida with your PI license if there's a reciprocity agreement, and only for 15 to 30 days, period. So what he's doing is committing a crime. I believe it's a misdemeanor. Could be a felony. I'm not sure because, you know, Florida's not my home state.
Right.
But the Florida Department of Agriculture needs to be advised. He's working as a PI in Florida, and if he says, well, I'm from Mississippi, they don't give a shit because there's no license in Mississippi and there's no reciprocity agreement with Mississippi. So he's committing a crime.
Yep.
It's plain and simple.
Yep, that's what we're trying to expose now, because he is in Tampa and in Safety Harbor area, and he's trying to rely on this PI license or lack thereof from Mississippi as to his ability to conduct business here. And he was on my show earlier, and I asked him, what state is on your driver's license? Is it Mississippi or Florida? And he refused to answer.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just semantics. In Mississippi, there's no PI license of any sort. All he may have, and I hear this all the time, I'm licensed in Mississippi. Really, what kind of license do you have? Well, I'm licensed through the county. I'm licensed through the city. I'm licensed through Secretary of State. Well, what he's telling you is, well, I have a business license, which any fool with any business can get. Floor company, maid service, you know, they don't care if it's an investigation company. So he has no licensing in Mississippi, no PI licensing in Mississippi, because there are none. And Florida doesn't care. He's got to be licensed as a PI in Florida. He's violating the law, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And he's certainly not a member of MPIA. So you need to contact them, and you need to, because I don't think law enforcement is just not up on those type of charges, because, you know, this would have to come from the Florida Department of Agriculture.
Right.
But yeah, so he's in violation of the law and should be sued.
Yeah. Because
he's clearly violating the law.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, I thought he was doing some aspects of this crap from Mississippi, which would be fine because nobody would care. But he can't do it from Florida.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
His business address is even on his business license with the with Mississippi shows his Florida address. So he's actually conducting all of his business in Florida and trying to say he's allowed to because of this fictitious business filing he has in Mississippi. And I'm saying that's not how it works. You got to follow the law where you reside, and you reside in Florida.
Absolutely, and unless he was, you know, getting some kind of and operating under a reciprocity agreement, which he's not. And in Florida, you have to have one or the other. You have to have an A license or a C license. A is an agency, C is an individual. And if you have a C license, like I have in Florida, you have to be under an agency. I had an agency my own agency in Florida for several years. It just got too expensive, and I wasn't doing enough work down here. So now I maintain my C license under 2 or 3 companies in Florida. And what that means is I can only take cases through one of those companies.
Right.
So, because he don't know the law. Does he have a criminal history?
He does. But he says he does have a criminal history, but I'm still hairy on whether he was convicted or, you know, they just stood him on probation and reduced the charges. But he was arrested on 2 felonies, but he has proclaimed that he is not a felon. He has a right to vote. So I have an understanding that there may have been a plea deal or reduction of charges. So I've got to look into that further. But yeah, it does sound like he has had a criminal past, but I don't know what, if at all, he was charged with. Well,
you know, that's his problem. He cannot get licensed, even if he was put on probation. I mean, unless those charges were expunged, and then it would depend on what the charges are.
Right. It was for grand theft.
Okay, yeah, certainly some kind of moral turpitude, you know, something like that, it wouldn't matter. But unless he's had those charges expunged, I mean, he cannot get licensed anywhere. Yeah. Anywhere. But he can work in Mississippi.
Gotcha.
But, you know, he's violating the law. So
So now that you heard from this gentleman, which is active law enforcement, and the president of the Mississippi Professional Investigators Association, what are your thoughts? Do you believe that James Michael Terry is scheming people into believing he's a PI, a legitimate PI, when he has no legitimate PI credentials? He's inserting himself into these high-profile cases to make his name for himself as a PI when he's not even residing into the state in which he's trying to utilize the laws from. He's not a resident of the state of Mississippi. He has no business in Mississippi. Outside of having one fictitious name filing, he has no way proven that he is governed by Mississippi law. And that is important because that's the only place he has any information about himself or any business dealings that he's doing. He could not get licensed in the state of Florida. So please let me know if you know victims. One, if victims of his would like to be heard, please have them reach out to me, as we are definitely going to be exposing this and taking major action on this fact. So if you know of a victim, please have them reach out to me at bullhornbetty@gmail.com. Furthermore, do you believe he's a legitimate PI, or do you think he's a scammer? I am interested in your thoughts as we dive into this, as we take a deeper dive into James Michael Terry that is trolling missing persons groups on Facebook. If you guys have a James Michael Terry in your Facebook groups, in your missing person Facebook groups, please block him. He is preying on victims. He is preying on the weak because they're eager to learn about their loved ones, and he's scamming them out of thousands of dollars. So if you are conducting a missing person Facebook group, please make sure James Michael Terry has been removed. God bless each and every one of you. We fight for victims, all victims. This is a different type of victimization, but we will expose it. Have an amazing day, and happy 4th of July to you all.